prosecutor's voice carried easily in courtroom 3. It always did. Delia Marsh had been taking down proceedings in that room for 11 years. And she had learned early that some voices are built to fill space, to push against the walls and the high windows and the worn oak of the gallery, rail until the air itself feels occupied. Warren Galt had that kind of voice. He used it the way certain men use a hand on a shoulder, remind you of his size. Convenient, he said, and let the words sit. He was facing the bench, but his eyes had drifted to the jury box. Held no jury today. Only the 4 remaining spectators and the low winter light coming through the glass. Convenient timing, convenient diagnosis, convenient records that arrived, if I'm reading the date correctly, 3 days after the filing. Mavis Stern sat in the witness chair and said nothing. Delia's fingers hovered above the keys. She was 26 years old and had learned not to let her face move during testimony. She looked at Mavis Stern the way she looked at everything in that room, as a thing to be recorded, not felt. But Mavis Stern was hard not to feel. She was 61. Thin, in the way illness makes a person thin, with hands folded in her lap and eyes that had already done a great deal of looking to difficult things. She wore a cardigan the color of old ivory. Her spine was straight. Her face was entirely still. Galt took a step toward the witness stand. You understand I'm not disputing that you're ill, Mrs. Stern. I'm disputing the timeline of your awareness. I'm disputing whether this court should accept, at face value, a set of documents that materialized on a schedule that happens to benefit your claim. He said your claim, the way some people say a child's excuse. Do you have a response to that? Mavis Stern looked at him for a moment. The dates on those records are the dates I received my results, she said. The cancer does not adjust its schedule to my filing. A sound moved through the room. Not quite a laugh, not quite a breath. Galt smiled with one side of his mouth. He turned slightly, as if to invite the empty gallery to share something with him. Of course, he said. Course it doesn't. Delia's hands resumed their work. She typed what was said. That was the job. She did not type. He turned his back on her, while she was still speaking. She did not type. She watched him do it with the patience of someone who has watched a great many things, and is no longer surprised. Those were not her words to keep. At the bench, Judge Renata Fenn had been still for several seconds. She was not a dramatic woman. Delia had recorded 2 years of her proceedings, and had come to understand that Judge Fenn's stillness was not indifference. It was the opposite, was the quality of someone who has heard enough, and is now deciding what to do with what she has heard. It looked, from the outside, like calm. It was something more than calm. Mr. Galt, she said. He turned. The oncologist report, the complete file. She did not raise her voice. It to the bench, please. There was a pause. Galt's second chair, a younger woman named Prentice, was already moving, lifting the folder from the table, carrying it forward. She set it before the judge and returned to her seat without looking at anyone. Judge Fenn opened the file. The room did what rooms do when a judge reads. It waited. Galt clasped his hands behind his back. Mavis Stern looked at her own hands in her lap. The 4 people in the gallery did not move. Delia's fingers rested on the keys, and she watched the judge the way she'd learned to, with enough attention to be ready and enough distance to stay present. The silence lasted 4 minutes. Delia knew, because she had a clock on the wall to her left that she checked habitually, the way some people check a door. When Judge Fenn looked up, she did not look at Galt first. She looked at Mavis Stern. Mrs. Stern, she said, I'm going to read a portion of this report into the record. You are not required to respond. I simply want it on the record. Do you understand? Yes, said Mavis Stern. Thank you. The judge found the page she wanted. She read without preamble and without performance. Voice was the same voice she used for everything, clear, unhurried, carrying the specific weight of someone who understands that words entered into a record become permanent. Primary diagnosis confirmed. Stage 4 metastatic adenocarcinoma, non-small cell bilateral involvement. Initial consultation, August 14th. Biopsy results returned and reviewed with patient, August 19th. Patient informed of prognosis and treatment options. August 19th, 3:40 p.m. Recs transmitted to patient's written request, August 23rd. She paused. Signed, Dr. Carolyn Vasquez, MD, Oncology, Harlan Memorial. Certification seal, present. Lab verification chain, complete. Records classification, primary medical documentation, subject to secondary authentication under State Evidentiary Rule 8034. She closed the file. The filing date in this matter, she said, is August 26th. Galt said nothing. The records were in the patient's hands 3 days before the filing, Mr. Galt, not 3 days after. She set the file to her left and folded her hands on the bench. That is not a small error. That is the opposite of the timeline you presented to this court. Delia was typing. She was typing everything. Face was not moving, but her chest had done something she would not have been able to describe precisely. A kind of opening. The way a window opens when you didn't know the room was close. I am striking your characterization of these records from the proceedings, Judge Fenn said. The suggestion that Mrs. Dern's diagnosis was manufactured or strategically timed is not supported by this evidence. It is contradicted by it. That characterization does not belong in this record, and it will not remain there. She picked up her pen, entering a formal notation that counsel's representation regarding the document timeline was materially inaccurate, and that this court finds no basis, none, for the implication that the witness falsified or strategically produced her medical records. She wrote. Pen moved, Delia typed. Galt had not moved. His hands were still clasped behind his back. He was looking at a point somewhere near the middle of the room. Not the bench, not the witness, not his own table. He was the kind of man who knew how to hold himself when things went wrong. Delia had seen that too in 11 years. The spine stays straight. The face stays arranged. But something behind the eyes goes quiet in a particular way. The way a building goes quiet after a sound that is too large for it. Mrs. Dern, the judge said, your testimony stands. Your records are entered as submitted. The objection is overruled and the mischaracterization is corrected on the record. A pause. I am sorry that you had to sit here and hear your medical history described the way it was described. You answered it with more composure than this court had a right to expect. Mavis Dern looked at the judge. She did not cry. Delia had the impression that she had spent some portion of the last several months getting very clear about what deserved her tears and what did not. This, the law working the way the law is supposed to work, did not seem to her to be an occasion for tears. It seemed to be an occasion for a small, steady nod, which she gave. Thank you, Your Honor, she said. That's all I needed. Delia's fingers stilled. She had typed those words. Shh. That's all I needed. For a moment, she sat with them in a way she did not usually sit with testimony. She was a court reporter, took down what was said, and she kept the record, and she did not editorialize. That was the job, and she believed in it. She was also 26 years old, and she had just watched a woman with stage 4 cancer sit in a chair and refuse to flinch, while a man in a suit called her truth a strategy, and then watched a judge take 4 minutes and a pen and put the truth back exactly where it belonged, in the permanent record. In plain language, in a small wood-paneled room with high windows where the winter light came through indifferent to everything, she thought. This is what the room is for. She had known that technically since her first day. She had not until today felt it the way she felt it now. Galt gathered his papers. He did not speak again that session. The notation the judge had entered would follow the case wherever it went. The implication he had made, the correction the court had required. Both of them now fixed in the record as clearly as anything else that had happened in courtroom 3 on that gray Tuesday morning in January. Outside afterward, Delia stood at the top of the courthouse steps and watched taxi pull away from the curb. She did not know if Mavis Dern was in it. She thought probably yes. She thought about the way the judge had read the date aloud. August 19th, 3:40 p.m. with no more and no less weight than it required. How the precision of it had been in its way a form of care. How the law at its best is that, not theatrical, not triumphant, but accurate. Accurate in a way that refuses to let the careless version stand. She went back inside. There were 2 more cases on the afternoon docket. She sat down at her machine, and she was ready.